We're live. We're back.
Yeah, we're live. That was my fault, everyone. Sorry, my good laptop, of course, crashed for some reason. So, my bad. We're gonna start up again. Go ahead, Riaz.
All right. Sorry. Thanks. So we are on the question. Back to Julia. Really, is that what do you believe are the most effective educational formats for programs, or how do you tell that this is the program that we want to do a enduring, or we want to do a live meeting, or what kind of meeting we want to do?
Thanks, Riaz. I believe, in my mind, really the idea is to understand kind of what problem you're trying to solve, and the group of people or processes or healthcare systems that you want to address. So I don't know how many of you listened to an ACCME webinar that was last week. Graham, the CEO and president, gave a talk, and one of the things that I loved that he said was, as providers, there should be kind of more focus and more planning and a little bit more thinking allocated to really figuring out, what is the problem that they're trying to solve with a specific group or in a specific setting, and then basing and developing education kind of specific to that. So although I wish that there was, a formula that I can speak to, I think that, it's really important to look at the problem, and it's really an individual approach. So yeah.
Okay, great. Sue, do we have you?
Yep, you do. Okay, in voice only. Yeah, it's dependent upon the therapeutic area, your strategy, the learning objectives, the gaps. It's not an easy question to ask, and I may have a favorite type of activity that I think works great, yet the learners may not think so. So it's really up to them, and yeah.
So Sue, I'm going to go back to a couple of clarifications then. So when you're writing your call for grants, how much of that information do you give, and then, or do you just say we want to reach this target audience, and really leave it up to the providers to come up with that innovation, or and we've got $250,000 or whatever dollar amount you have. How much information do you give on your call for grants versus just opening it up?
Right. So I give enough information so that they have a little guidance. So if you think of some therapeutic areas, the educational gaps are huge. So I think if I said, hey, I'm looking to educate primary care, I've got 300,000, folks wouldn't know where to begin. So I give a little bit of information so that they get an idea of where we're looking to go. But a lot of it, I really leave the format up to whomever's submitting. I mean, I did one call for grant for quality improvement, but that's the most that I've ever really specified.
Gotcha. Amanda?
Yeah, I think I echo what Julia said in terms of answering the question. And we do try to provide some information on our call for grant applications. Essentially, if I can answer the question, if I'm reading through your grant submission and I can tell that you understand the problem. You have a good grasp of what the problem is, not just you've regurgitated the literature, and you've provided all the data. And sometimes all of the needs assessments largely read the same. But if I'm reading through and it's telling the story of what that particular knowledge gap is for the healthcare audience, and then what you've designed in the program matches what that gap is. So if you've talked about how healthcare practitioners or maybe the entire care team needs education, and it would be beneficial for them to do small educational programs as a team, and that way that would enhance their ability to approach that therapeutic area and that patient as a team better, then that makes sense. Those two things match up. So I think what I really look for is in reading these, do you understand the problem? And then your design, is it feasible? And also, I think one thing I want to stress is you don't have to reach everyone necessarily. I mean, if you don't have to kind of throw every option into the grant. If you know the problem and you've narrowed in on one particular area or even target audience, that's fine. Because what I look to do with the funding is maybe to do, if we're able to, budget-wise, fund a couple different types of programs.
Okay, and okay, great. So the next question we got is, would it be possible to provide more specific information related to grants denied due to funding, such as whether funds were limited or funding currently is not available? If due to funding limitations, although it may be supporter specific, can grants get resubmitted for lesser dollar amounts that are at a future time period? One of the things that we do at Astellas is that we consider grants for up to the requested dollar amount, and if we can give only 25,000 instead of 50, that's what we'll at least offer, that 25 for that program, and then the requesters out to try to get the additional support from wherever. But you let's go for Amanda. Do you do the same thing? How do you guys? How much information do you provide?
So we provide a certain a budget cap, and we do provide specific instructions on what exactly we're looking for. We don't recommend, like you, don't go over that. We could fund up to that amount. I think, we think we're pretty clear about the information that we provide that we're looking for in that call for grant application. And then in terms of denials, it's tough. We want to give some feedback back so you can improve and learn from it. I will tell you, our system does indicate whether it was simply funding, a matter of your proposal was fine, it was well rated by the committee, but we simply didn't have an ability to fund everything, and that's really what that would mean. And then if there's an issue of compliance, we will tell you that. But it's a hard situation to be in on this end as well, because sometimes when you decide to push that button and give a little bit more feedback, it kind of opens up, a dialogue and that I'm not always prepared for, or I can't always provide the level of feedback that people are looking for. So
right.
It's challenging.
Julia?
In the interest of time, I'll agree with what Amanda said. I don't have anything additional to add.
And Sue, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that there's a fine line between trying to educate each other and being seen as coaching by our biggest critics. So I think that's the delicate balance that we walk.
Yeah. Okay. So if it is not clear whether funding is available for a therapeutic area, would you encourage providers to email the grants office for clarification prior to submission? I don't know how much can you have discussions prior to submission versus even having the discussion after it's submitted. Sue?
Yeah, so for AZ, we actually have what we call a rapid process. So folks seeking support from us can actually send a little bit of information into our grants office web email, and within 24 to 48 hours, we'll have a response. So whether we have the budget, go ahead and submit. Whether we don't have the budget, don't submit. We can say whether we've supported something very similar, so don't submit. But that gives people a little guidance.
Okay. Do you guys have that rapid screening at all at Pfizer, Amanda?
No, we don't. I know people have reached out to us to ask if we provide support outside of call for grant applications or therapeutic areas listed in the annual meetings, and it's a fair question, but we don't do a lot unsolicited. I won't say never, but it's not. There's not really an avenue for that right now.
Okay, Julia.
I don't know if we would encourage providers to reach out to us about budget, but if the therapeutic area is listed on our website, that means that there's budget available. So if it's on there, then we are accepting applications.
Do you guys allow any kind of concept review or anything? Just like a 2-page review?
Concept review?
Yeah.
We often have conversations with providers on different ideas that they might have, but we don't guarantee any type of decision at that time.
Right. Okay. Perfect. That's great. Okay. So another on budgets, really, we got a couple questions. One is, are there certain budget limitations for certain line items that would lead to denials? Or, what we often do is we compare the grants side by side, and we say, although it might not be a hard and fast rule that for audiovisual you can only be $10,000 or something like that, but we would definitely say, is this in the realm of kind of the average, right? So, Julia, are there certain budget limitations or line items that are red flags that you kind of say, hey, we can't go above this percentage or dollar amount for that?
So I'd like to take this question just a little bit, a level higher, and speak to budgets in general. We realize, I think, as a CME community, or at least based on historical kind of grant submissions, that these programs are expensive. And sometimes you need to support many of them to bring awareness and engagement, and really kind of bring that retention of learning to different audiences. With that said, I have to say that, in my view, these, in general, CME grants tend to be on the higher side, and it's getting harder and harder to justify supporting larger amounts, especially when kind of the impact of the education is not thoroughly communicated. So, I guess with that said, there aren't necessarily limits, but we are beginning to scrutinize more. And I have to tell you from experience, some of the most great programs that we supported and impactful have been on the lower amount side. So I think there's room to really think as a community, both from the supporter and the provider side, and really be responsible too, because the healthcare environment, we know that there's a push to lower costs and improve outcomes. And I feel that as a community, we need to contribute to that strategy and not exacerbate it per se. So.
Okay, and I'm gonna actually, just in the interest of time here, I'm gonna kind of go a little bit rapid on some of these questions. And I wanted to, one thing that I want to get the three of your opinions on, and experience-wise, we're often, as an industry, actually, just from the providers as well as the supporters side, really scope changes are really difficult to deal with. They're time-consuming and difficult to deal with from a supporter standpoint. From a provider standpoint, they may delay the start of the program, or how do we get it's everyone's timing is different, because one company might do a call for grants that they're not going to approve or even review grants for another 2 months or 3 months or whatever, and the other company is on a rolling basis and they can give their decision faster or whatever. So I want to just quickly brainstorm with each of you just ideas as to ways to reduce scope changes. Is there a best practice that you have seen work from something that the providers can do to reduce the amount or pain of scope changes? And then is there something that you can give little tidbits to our commercial supporters in the audience today to really give them an idea, and enduring forever here for an hour, for a year, be enduring that, to say this is how other commercial supporters might be able to reduce the scope changes or approach them a little differently. So I'm going to start with Amanda, but I definitely do want to go through all three of you guys on that one.
Yeah, I certainly don't have an answer on how to reduce them. I know from my personal feeling, having been on the other side, probably more time than on this side, it happens. And I think if the intent is to design and deliver the best program possible, my understanding is that scope changes occur, and I'd rather have an open dialogue about what they are. Obviously, after a grant decision has been made, we don't look to influence any of the programming.
How about you, Julia?
I definitely think there's probably room for improvement from both, the supporter and the provider side in terms of, the supporter side. I know sometimes we hold grants and that pushes timelines and affects change of scopes. And then from the provider side, sort of that planning, maybe there's opportunities there in the processes.
Sue?
Well, so I echo the comments that have come before me, and I do certainly feel everyone's pain. I will say that if I believed in a program to support it, I am willing to endure some of the scope changes. I do understand the need for programs to be executed upon, with less funding, so that you can only do so much. But it's really, I believed in the program when the LOA was executed, so I support it through. In terms of best practices, it's really tough on the commercial supporter side, because we could call each other and say, hey, we've got this great grant. Would you be willing to review it? But then we could be criticized and said, well, wait a second. Now we're trying to get grant support and we're showing favoritism. So, we try to do the right thing and we try to get good quality education out there, and yet we can be criticized. So I'm open to all suggestions.
So, a couple of ideas I've seen in the industry really one is around a contingency plan. It's kind of upon submission. Have you guys seen that, or seen kind of faults with that, or explored it in your companies?
I've seen that, and I have no problem with it.
Amanda, I'm going to interrupt real quick. Sorry. I'm just going to say, for everyone who's watching, I'm going to let them keep going a little bit past our 55 mark. Scott will probably start up the next session, so you'll have to refresh your screen. But for the archive session, just so I want them to get to their questions that they have, so I'm going to let it go a little bit longer. But this might end, and then you'll just refresh. But for us, it'll keep on running. Sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Thank you for that announcement. I think I like to see, when we're reviewing something, if there's a backup plan, option A, option B. Obviously, it's not something I encourage people to put into every single submission. But if I have a question mark in my mind, if I provide only partial funding for this, or if you've indicated that you're seeking multi-support, what's the plan if you don't get that other support? It would be helpful to be able to answer that question mark in my mind during the review.
Okay, great. One of the other questions I want to make sure we kind of cover here, based on your experience from companies you have seen, companies consider grant requests for general healthcare topics like adherence when it's not directly tied to a therapeutic area. So would you guys actually consider topics that are not tied to a therapeutic area? Do you require them to be tied to at least one of your therapeutic areas in some way? Or what's your experience on that? And so we're going to start with Amanda.
Yes, we do require. I think the only exception is there's support for professional continuous education and annual meetings under one particular area, but otherwise we do look for everything to be linked to a particular therapeutic area.
Okay, Julia?
For the most part, we do consider things to be linked to a therapeutic area, although last year we did have a new therapeutic area just for quality improvement.
So your quality improvement is not necessarily quality improvement in obesity or something that is your therapeutic areas?
It could be something like, the principles of primary care medical home, or, the triple aim. So we've supported a few programs last year, but this year we moved more towards alignment with our therapeutic area.
Okay, and Sue?
Yeah, everything has to be therapeutically aligned, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. And the last question for today, I'm really going to ask, and I thank you guys all for your time and expertise on this. really is parting thoughts a little bit. When you read a needs assessment, what are some of the items that you are looking for? Is it, are you looking for certain kinds of evidence to be in that needs assessment or surveys or anything like that? And any other kind of parting thoughts you want to give to make sure that we're moving the needle forward. We're going to get the best grants submissions and make the most impact. Julia, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. I like to see sort of, when I look at a needs assessment, I'd like to clearly be able to tell what's the current gap, sort of what is the desired outcome, and then in between, kind of what's the area that you've identified as an educational need, and then how does that tie into what's going on with the healthcare environment. So really, simplicity is beauty. I don't necessarily like reading through paragraphs and paragraphs of referenced articles. So if you can make it kind of easy to identify and see where you've identified a gap and what, and references, that would be ideal.
Right, Sue?
Right, so in a needs assessment, I'm not looking for a literature review. And I know, Amanda, you talked a little bit about this, and to Julia. I really want to know what is at the heart of it. Why are we still seeing these educational or practice gaps? Let's really attack the source of the issue. So I'm really looking for proposals that go down deeper. I'm looking for needs assessments that provide information from all sorts of resources, right? So it's outcomes from previous programs, it's a literature, it's faculty insights, you name it, it's surveys. I would love to see it all. I think in terms of a closing comment, we didn't really talk a lot about outcomes, but one thing I'd like to say is even though commercial supporters may only have a short time to present outcomes to our colleagues, I think we would be very short-sighted if we didn't ask for as much information as possible from the grant sponsors, because many insights that I've gotten from outcome reports, I will interject when we're having discussions about medical strategy. So insights may not be able to be shared at the time when an outcomes report is being presented, but that information helps me understand the environment better and helps me be a better collaborator on the core medical team. So I thank everyone for all the information that they share.
Great. And last one, Amanda, briefly, in like 60 seconds. Any thoughts?
I think, one of the most impactful data points that I've shared recently in terms of outcomes was actually one particular organization tied the number of people that attended their activity to patient lives. And so great, you tell me how many butts were in the seats. Okay, but taking that many steps further to indicating how many patient lives those healthcare practitioners touch, and if you can take the education funded and show the direct impact to the patient and the potential there, obviously, I think that's very strong, and information like that is very
Great. Thank you all three for all your expertise and patience and help. And Derek, thanks for giving us this opportunity. But we'll close today, and definitely I think we've got a few more questions, but we'll have to leave that for the next CME Palooza. So,
Thanks, everyone.
Good. Thank you so much, everyone.
And let me just, for anyone who maybe is watching, I don't know if you're watching live anymore, I think we're cut off, but for the archive anyway, thank you all for participating. Sorry for the little glitch in the middle. I think we were able to come back from that okay. Sorry to the panelists as well. Thanks for hanging in there with me. The next session should be up. If it's not up right now, we'll be up very soon. You just have to refresh your screen to watch it. If you're watching live, if you're watching archive, just click on the link. Thanks, everyone, and I will talk to you all soon.
Thanks.
Thank you, Derek.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.